Hi guys, welcome to SO Live. I'm Danny Flexen, and if you will indulge me for just a few moments, I'm going to begin this week's episode with something of a history lesson. All will become clear. Now, back in the old days, and it might suit you to visualize this little anecdote in black and white, football fans, of which I was one, used to huddle round their television sets in a state of awe as something called the vidi printer slowly and painstakingly stuttered out that week's football scores on a Saturday afternoon. Now, the vidi printer back then in the 80s was cutting edge technology, but one of its many flaws was that the typeface used was incredibly small, although that was commensurate with most of the televisions at the time. And sometimes the producers deemed it necessary that the most notable scores, the really big ones, would not only be put out in number form, but would be spelt out as well. Now, obviously, this didn't just help the visually impaired. It also kind of emphasized the scale of victory or defeat for the respective teams. So, for example, I was a Liverpool fan and still am. It might say Liverpool 7, S-E-V-E-N, each uppercase letter, a fresh dagger in the heart of the poor team name that was to follow. Say QPR 0. Now, I know what you're thinking, you young hipsters out there. WTAF, Flexen. What does any of this have to do with boxing? Well, I was put in mind of the much-missed vidi printer on Saturday night as I watched the 5 versus 5 come to its one-sided conclusion. Because not only did Zhilei Zhang condemn Deontay Wilder to a 4th career defeat, all in his last 5 fights, he also provided something of an exclamation point in what was a dominant victory for Frank Warren's Queensberry over Eddie Hearn's Matchroom. The final score was 10, T-E-N, 0 to Frank Warren. And we discussed this last week. We previewed and predicted. And although neither Ayman Khan nor myself got the exact score correct, we did come down on opposite sides of the fence. And to coin another dated football reference, Ayman, your boys took one hell of a beating. And I have to ask, I know you're still in awe of this little trip down memory lane that I've just provided, but where did it all go wrong?
Was that what that was all about? Just leading up until the proverbial "I told you so." I thought there was going to be a big crescendo right at the end with a thank you Wilder, but Danny getting his win in had to supersede all of that. Fair enough. Fair enough.
God. There you go.
Fair enough. I accept. Now, saying to Danny before the podcast started that, I've had some W takes in the past, as the kids might say. We're down with the lingo of the
WTAF, bro.
I definitely had some L takes, and this was one of them, with a couple of them specifically. Although a couple of them could have gone, well, one of them specifically could have gone a different way, but the rest of them, boy, was I wrong. I'm happy to discuss it all. Happy to eat my crow, as the Americans would say, with you guys on the channel and with you, Danny. Looking forward to this week's episode.
Good stuff. Brought it right back round to where we need to be as true professional in the digital age. Yeah, guys, please do give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and get your comments and questions in to SO Live. We will read as many out as we can. The live chat is always a thriving hub of boxing fandom. It's a lot of other things as well, but let's stay positive as we were just at the start of the show. But Ayman, yeah, the original question kind of does still stand, preamble aside. Where did it all go wrong? Not for you and your predictions necessarily, but for Matchroom and Eddie Hearn as a whole. Did he pick the wrong team? Were the matchups not quite suitable? Or was it just a case of underperforming on the night?
I think it's a little bit of everything, really. I mean, the bottom line thing has got to go down to the matchmaking and some of the confidence in some of the fighters, and underestimating really some of the fighters as well too on the Frank Warren side. Look, specifically one of the fights I maintain that I think Matchroom should have got a win here was Ray Ford. I thought Ray Ford nicked it against Nick Ball. Not unhappy that Nick Ball didn't win. I think there was one of those type of fights where you couldn't really be unhappy with either. Nick Ball didn't run away with it. Ray Ford didn't run away with it either. But that's only one extra point to match him there, where everything else was resounding. Craig Richards, look, he should have got the win. An experienced fighter against Willie Hutchinson, who's shown his flaws in the past. Although a consummate boxer, Craig really just never stepped on the gas and maybe showed that some of those gears are really rusty, or may even not be in there, getting older as he does do. The experience isn't outweighing some of the athleticism he needs to compete with the younger Willie Hutchinson. Also in a bit of state of flux as well, too, with changing trainers to Shane McGuigan. Might have been the wrong time to take this type of fight, but then you've got to balance that off with the riches that are available to you in the pay against someone like Willie Hutchinson. So now it's a bit weird because it skews the shift of planning your career, because you could also take more money for a fight that wouldn't be more fancied if this wasn't the state right now. Wilder versus Zhang, look, I was really feeling not very confident in my pick of Deontay Wilder when I saw Zhang had weighed a mighty 70 pounds heavier than Deontay Wilder, and he just walked through that right hand, and then he showed his flaws as a boxer, being caught and just didn't handle the situation at all. I think, look, we'll discuss that in a bit more detail, I'm sure. And Dubois as well too. Look, really cast away a lot of the doubts, and people who want to throw around and band about the quit word. I don't do that. I won't do that with a fighter. But surely that tag is now completely removed off of Daniel Dubois after sparring stories is sparring. We get told by coaches and trainers that, you know, sparring is sparring, whatever. But this was a sparring story that was accepted, and it was a sparring story that went as far as to say that Dubois and Hrgović sparred, and Dubois ended up on the canvas and in the hospital. He carried that into this fight, and he did what he did. He went head first, quite literally at points, into Filip Hrgović and came out the victor by stopping him. Incredible, incredible wins for Dubois specifically, and others on the Queensberry side.
Just on the note of Willie Hutchinson, the undeniably handsome hirsute Willie Hutchinson, to echo his post-fight comments, he's now been nominated for a WBO interim title fight, hot on the heels of his victory, his upset victory on Saturday night against Joshua Buatsi, and the teams are now apparently in negotiations to make that happen, with Beterbiev obviously out for an unspecified amount of time with his knee injury. So that's an interesting one, kind of a bit of a beneficiary of the Anthony Yard fallout with Queensberry, or the kind of confusion around that contract status, is that Willie Hutchinson is now apparently in line as the WBO number 6 to challenge Joshua Buatsi, or co-challenge for that interim world title. So yeah, just thought I should mention that from the jump. But yeah, I mean, I got, obviously, even though I was closer to the right score total than you were, I still got a couple of results wrong. They just kind of counteracted each other, so I got a bit lucky. But I didn't expect Willie Hutchinson to beat Craig Richards, and I thought Craig Richards was really poor. I'm just going to get it out right now, because I really like Craig. I think he's a great guy. I really like Shane McGuigan as a trainer. So there's no kind of axe to grind. I've followed Craig's career since he was fighting in small halls, and you know, I saw him underperform once against Chad Sugden and escape with a draw. He got his, really bloody York Hall Classic, that one. And he just didn't seem to be at the races. And there were people at the time saying, when I was watching it, like texting and so on, maybe he's caught between styles because he's going from one gym to another. You know, he spent so much of his career with Peter Sims. Now with Shane, is he still adjusting to that new style, that new environment, perhaps? But Willie Hutchinson kind of came in with nothing to lose. He wasn't expected to win the fight widely. And he seemed very relaxed in his performance. That seemed to translate through. And Richards just never seemed to let his hands go. I know it's easy to say watching from the sofa, but he'd get into position with his feet. He'd cut the ring off pretty well. But then he'd wait and he'd get beaten to the punch constantly by a sharper, slicker opponent in Hutchinson, who, as we said, has already seemingly got his reward. And yeah, Dubois, I mean, we'll talk more about Dubois in due course, but he impressed me more than anyone on the card. I was saying to Ayman off camera, I think it's poetic that he was able to effectively force Hrgović to quit, to bully Hrgović until he didn't really want it anymore. Yes, he was a bit errant with the head on occasion. I think the second cut certainly was opened by his big noggin. But the first one, I think, came from a punch, and that was the more serious of the two. But not only that, it just felt like Hrgović didn't want to be there towards the end. You know, there was no complaints really about the headbutts, and certainly none about the stoppage that was enforced by the doctor and the referee accepted. I thought Dubois, as the fight got harder, Dubois seemed to relish it, whereas Hrgović seemed to fade. And given all the stuff that's been said about Dubois and his past history, I don't think there's a more heartening more satisfying way he could have pulled it out on the night. Even if he'd have knocked him out in the first round, I don't think that would have given him as much in the eyes of the public as this has. Right, let's go to the chat for the first time today. I can see they're flying in as I speak. SW, I'm guessing that's Steve Wellett. Oh, is he SW Boxing? Ayman can correct me if I'm wrong. Says Wilder was way too skinny. He should have been at least 235 pounds for Zhang. Georgie Harji, incredible Romanian footballer, sticking with a football theme, says sack Malik Scott. I've seen Malik Scott, and we'll talk about this when we get onto Wilder in a minute, but I've seen him get a lot of criticism. I'm not sure how much of Wilder's apparent decline can be put down to the change of trainer, but we will talk about that. Andy Troyland says Zhang done the impossible. Wow. I'm not sure if it's impossible to beat someone who lost their previous fight, but we'll get onto that. Thunder Road says Danny Flexen on fire. Ayman Khan is terrified. I always find it interesting to see which footballer you associate with that chant. For me, it's Will Grigg, because it used to be Will Grigg's on fire, but I'm not sure if it's the same for everyone.
Yep.
Nat says what an extended opening anecdote that was, Flexen. Oh, there you go. What can I say? It's just what I do. It's in my wheelhouse. It's in my box of tricks. DB Cooper 1, he's on board as well. Bloody hell, Professor Flexen is on one. I agree. Amazing night of boxing from the start and love the concept. Matchroom casuals in the bin. Ooh, we're getting some tribal warfare here. Thunder Road says Ayman still needs to do his forfeit and number 1 on all sides. Does that include the top? Does the top count as a side? Ayman, when you go into the barber?
I've been to the barber. I've been and come back. Got the haircut sorted. Just come back from a workout, so there's a bit of sweat moving around and it's mixed things up. Haven't had the time to fully fix it, but this is it. This is the look going forward. Give it a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. Let me know.
Sai AVFC says, afternoon, I'd like to see Wilder just retire while he still has his marbles and health. 7 kids need their dad. Yeah, very wise. Chiakwu TV says, did Wilder lose the match? Yes. Glad to break some news here on SO Live. Chiakwu, he did lose, unfortunately for him. Thunder Road's encouraging people to hit the thumbs up. I endorse that, Thunder Road. Richard Smith says, I just think Wilder is lost in the ring when that right hand can't find its target. Yeah, but I mean, it was far away from its target and he faded a lot quicker than we've seen him in recent times as well. Tech Test says, life. When you win, everybody is on your dick, but when you lose, suddenly you're the worst boxer on earth. Keep your head up, Bronze Bomber. When you pray for rain, you have to deal with the mud too. Nice. Yeah, why not? Les Dwitt says, Hrgovic beat nobody. It was gifted the decision versus Zhang. 2-5 Hrgovic was a joke. Yeah, I had a kind of debate about this on Twitter about, 20 minutes ago. And that Hrgovic, I said he was world class and that got panned by a couple of people. You don't get judged just by your worst performance, which it probably was against Dubois. He was a world-class amateur and he was definitely a top 10 professional heavyweight. Yes, maybe he shouldn't have got the decision against Zhang, but it was an undeniably close fight. So even if he, was competitive with Zhang and you think he lost by a point or could have been a draw or whatever, Zhang's a world-class heavyweight. Hrgovic pushed him all the way. He's a world-class heavyweight. And he's had some other decent wins as well. So I think let's not be... It's a bit like Dubois, he lost to Joyce. He was never that good. Wilder, a lot of people now assuming that Wilder had retired, have started to assess his legacy and kind of intimate that maybe he wasn't as good as previously advertised. There's no real allowance for boxers to decline or to have fluctuating fortunes, and that's not great. DB Cooper 1 says, Kate Abdo's boyfriend, which for people who either don't know who Kate Abdo is or don't care about their relationship, is Malik Scott. Needs to be sacked. He's an Instagram trainer, teaches us more than he does his fighter. I mean, I can't knock people out like Wilder or at all. So I'm not sure how much he's taught me. Robert Badia says AJ and Triple D in talks. Yes, we're going to be getting onto that. That's segment number 2, Robert. So please do stay tuned. But yeah, so Wilder is our main topic this week. Everyone's discussing it as if he's actually retired because he has lost, as I said at the start, 4 of his last 5. His 4 career defeats have all come recently. 2 in a row, of course, after the Joseph Parker result. However, I unearthed a tweet. I say unearthed, I just came across it when I was on my timeline. A tweet earlier from someone purporting to be part of Wilder's camp. No one seems to be contradicting this. And Ayman, I don't know if you found it or not, but where he seems to suggest that Wilder plans to continue on with his career.
Yeah, I did have a cursory little quick look as you alerted me to it. I can't confirm as to whether he is part of or close to the Deontay Wilder camp at all. But if we take it on face value that he is, it doesn't surprise me too much in the sense of because of the amount of money that is on and capable to be, sold. Well, while Wilder's able to essentially, sell himself really for those last few paychecks, and I think that's what we saw this past weekend in against Zhilei Zhang. I don't think there's really a clamour from Deontay Wilder to get back to claiming the world title. Certainly, that's a long trek back. Even though with this heavyweight resurgence, where one can take a loss and it doesn't hurt as much as you may be used to in the past, because the frequency of these good top level fights are now happening over in Riyadh. But I mean, Wilder wanting to do that, if the risk is less so for Deontay Wilder and he's not going to get worryingly knocked out like he did last time round, then there is room for him to continue. But that's not really my stance on it. I would like to see Wilder rather sail off into the sunset, because I don't know, you mentioned there a lot of people kind of picking apart his legacy, and you do start to look at his previous fights and his CV more so with a microscope off of the back of these losses, and you say that maybe when the going got tough in the form of tougher opposition, did he quite hang? Did the Fury fights take a lot out of him, as it has maybe done Fury as well? You start to put those pieces together and you get a picture of a Wilder who just isn't there anymore. I do feel that, like, when people were saying, he can't pull the trigger, he's hesitant to pull the trigger, I kind of felt that he did have Zhang, or he noted that he hurt Zhang a little bit and then went for it. And that was ultimately part of his undoing, really. So you got some of the old Wilder in there. Maybe he wasn't as wild and windmilly as before, but people are also kind of now flipping that and saying, we want that Wilder back. That was what made him so dangerous. When Malik Scott and JD, who's still in the corner, although the corner is absent of Mark Breland, people kind of stating that Wilder had somewhat of a good jab whilst Mark Breland was there. Now, Mark Breland was definitely a fighter who showcased a good jab. I don't know if Deontay Wilder ever truly had a good jab. I certainly would have probably seen that more so in this fight with Zhang. Whether that would have changed anything, I highly doubt it. But look, I think Malik has done. I think what Malik has done, which people criticize him for, is he's traded away some of Wilder's want to take the risk to leave himself so open for the defensive care in the ring, and that has ultimately blunted Deontay Wilder's offense as a fighter, blunted Deontay Wilder's scariness as a fighter. He's made him think more about what's coming forward defensively, as opposed to being the destructive force on the offense like he was so much as he was on top of the WBC heavyweight division side of things. So I mean, that's one of those things where I don't think is going to change now, because now Wilder's seen and had those and taken those big shots. He'll know about those in fights going forward if he was to ever leave Malik Scott. I think those are imprinted on his mind of the dangers of, and he knows of the dangers himself. We've seen him visibly emotionally rocked in press conferences after he knocked out Helenius, which was almost like an accidental knockout. You could be forgiven to hear, maybe see that in a cartoon of Looney Tunes back in the day with some background cartoon noises of someone slipping on a banana and things. That's what it kind of reminds me of.
History today on a
yeah, but in that press conference, I think it was afterwards, he was crying about, and it is a really sad tale of Pritchard Colon, who took many illegal shots to the back of the head in his fight, and is now he'll never be the same. I think those sort of things, thinking about and having his foot a little bit outside of boxing specifically, has really blunted the force that's Deontay Wilder. Fights there still out for him. Don't really want to see him. Don't really want to shut the door on him either. It just depends on the fight that's there for him now, and I wait for that, and then I'll comment further then.
So, guys, Ayman doesn't want to shut the door on him, but do you? Because we're putting out the poll for this week, and it is simply, should Deontay Wilder retire? Should Wilder retire? We'll get back to Will Grigg again. Yeah, should he retire? Basic yes or no. You can obviously give your reasoning in the comments as well. Modfather Vinny, if you can put that out for us. I'm just going to have a look at the chat and go through some of those. And when we come back from that, we'll be looking at some punch stats from the Wilder-Zhang fight provided by our friends at Jabber. Know the Hut, as far as I'm aware. Let's have a look. Thunder Road, yeah, got that one already. DB Cooper 1, no, that's Kate Abdo's boyfriend. I'm not getting any fresh chats. Have I got it on the wrong? Yeah, I've got it on top chat instead of live chat. That's why. I think I'd be used to this by now. Right, so the poll is out. And, right, I've missed loads here by the look of it, I think. Tushin Rants says, Wilder's supposed KO power only works on boxers on the verge of being journeymen. And it takes him tons of right hands to even affect some fighters, like the Ortiz 1 fight, lol. Or Ortiz 1 fight, lol. Les Tweet says, I nailed the group round betting. Did Dubois round 7-9 at 17-2 and Zhang round 4-6 at 9-2. Smug face on. DB Cooper 1 says, Deontay Wilder reminds me a lot of Ryan Giggs. If you know, you know, sister-in-laws. Thanks, DB Cooper 1. Charlie Rogers says, Joyce versus Wilder. I think Joyce has got his own loser leagues boxing fight next up with Derek Chisora. So I wouldn't mind seeing a series of those, though, and we'll rid boxing of the people that need saving from themselves one at a time. DB Cooper 1 asked if Hrgovic, typically bad spelling, the next Martin Bacoli, legacy built upon sparring stories. Yeah, I mean, Billy Nelson's got reason to eat humble pie already after absolutely destroying Dubois verbally leading into the Hrgovic fight. He said that, what was it? I did the interview, so I should remember. He said Hrgovic would psychologically destroy Daniel Dubois, which clearly didn't happen, despite his best efforts in the early rounds. Toby Bartlett says, salute Seconds Out and the chat. Thank you, Toby. We salute you too. Arian Graves says, I believe the Fury trilogy destroyed both fighters. I believe Wilder broke his right hand a couple of fights ago and his right hand just isn't the same. Yeah, I mean, the Fury trilogy certainly, took a toll on them both, but I wouldn't say it ruined Fury given how close he pushed Oleksandr Usyk in their recent fight. I mean, if he comes out and gets wiped out in 2 or 3 rounds in the rematch in December, and that we're going to be talking about that rematch later, then maybe we'll reconsider. But I wouldn't say it's I wouldn't say it's ruined Fury, but it may have done that to Wilder. But I think inactivity has hurt Wilder just as much. But yeah, if Modfather Vinny, if you can hear us, if you can whack up those punch stats from Jabber from the Wilder Zhang fight, it'll be good to kind of go through those. So yeah, so as you can see there, despite them going a number of rounds, very few punches landed from either man. So not the most thrilling fight to watch, I've got to say, particularly in the UK where it was 1:30 a.m., something like that, when the fight reached its conclusion. I was definitely struggling to keep my eyes open by this point. And then you see them throwing very few punches and even fewer, minuscule amount of high impact blows or power punches, you might call them. Wilder actually outthrew Zhilei Zhang, but a lot of Wilder's shots were kind of half jabs, feints more than anything else. And then, yeah, you've got the pressure there. It was obviously Zhang was the man coming forward. Wilder was trying to box off the back foot, which a lot of times we've seen work. He lures people into that big right hand. And Zhang said in his post-fight interview that he did feel a number of Wilder shots that he does hit hard, but it wasn't anything he couldn't deal with. And as Ayman pointed out, Zhang had that massive weight advantage, which certainly probably helped him to absorb a lot of the shots. And I'm not sure Wilder ever got completely set. I think Wilder, as we saw against Fury in the second and third fights, is less effective when his space is cut down. He's a leverage puncher, if you like. He's got those long arms. He likes to throw looping, arcing shots, which make the most of that momentum. So, yeah, a bit of a drab fight as it turned out, but one in which you would have still backed Wilder, because if there's not much going on, you back the guy who's got that one-punch conclusive knockout power, usually. And I know Zhang's a big hitter in his own right, but he sets his shots up usually. Even in the Joyce fight, you saw him, either throw a feint or a setup shot before landing that big, finishing blow. But Wilder just never seemed to be completely motivated. He seemed frustrated. He seemed bothered, not least by the ending, of course, when he was complaining to the referee when he got hit with that final shot. Obviously, no excuses there. You've got to protect yourself at all times. He didn't seem particularly aggrieved by the mistake after the fight. But yeah, I mean, Ayman, is this as much a fight that Wilder lost as Zhang won, or am I not giving Zhang enough credit?
No, I think Zhang's got to take the credit here. I feel that Wilder landed his biggest punch or his big punches here, and Zhang just walked through it. And the moment I saw that happen, I was like, well, even Zhang tiring isn't really going to do much more because he's still able. It would take a real crazy Zhang onslaught for him to really tire and Wilder to tag him with something big. And I just didn't see that happening. Zhang's got too much nous as a boxer. Even though he has tired, I think he'd know to conserve his tank, especially with how he depleted so much in the latter half of his fight with Joe Parker. So that was never going to happen here. I think Zhang boxed a good fight, a smart fight. But I also just think as well, too, when you've had a blueprint so widely shown, those 3 Fury fights, no one in the boxing sphere has missed those 3 Fury Wilder fights. Notably, the heavyweights will all have watched that, especially the top level heavyweights will be thinking, I might be in with Wilder in the future. They'll have seen those 3 fights. They'll have seen the way Fury come back after a 12th round knockdown, and then the way he then implemented his game plan in the second and third fight and seen, look, this is the way to beat Deontay Wilder. This is what I do. Luis Ortiz was sort of onto it, but he was a bit too much off of the offense than how Fury kind of took it to that next level. So that's all that Joe Parker did, really. And it was blamed on ring rust. It was blamed on lack of activity. I don't think Deontay Wilder can really look at this as a lack of activity. Might he look to an excuse? There's some whispers around about maybe Zhang stepped on his foot, but that's all part of the boxing game, isn't it? If that's one of the reasons, that's another bit of experience as well, too. Nothing to really claim anything further than that. You got knocked out. That's what happened there. And look, Zhang got the win. I would like to remember as well, Deontay Wilder, even with all the hurt that he's received in the last few fights specifically, he always seems to, well, pretty much always seems to get back up. Even in this last fight with Zhang, he ended the fight on his feet, and he didn't stay down on the canvas. And I think that shows his true heart, his true willingness to, even if there's doubts about him, still being in boxing, he still took that fight and still wanted to take it, even if it was for big money. And I think that's got to be commended and saluted from a Wilder perspective. But this was just a brilliant victory for Zhilei Zhang. Whether or not it's a faded Wilder, I think actually, even to be fair, like if this was, if you want to say the prime Deontay Wilder, maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, I think the same outcome would have happened.
We'll go back to assessing Wilder's overall legacy. If he does intend to call it a day, we're not certain on that either way. But let's go to the chat. DB Cooper 1 says, bloody hell, Flexen. Calm down on the spelling. Some of us work in finance. We're not all BTEC boxing journalists or editors. Surely working in finance, you need to be able to spell. I would imagine that's still a key part of what you do when you're sending emails and contracts, for example. And as for BTEC, mate, I've got a degree. Yes, it's in American studies. Yes, it's from Brunel, but still, it's a degree. FNOR says Wilder should fight Joyce, and if he can't knock him out, then retire. Yeah, I'm not sure if that should be the barometer. Hasn't Joyce got like a thicker skull than most people or something? That's not a knock, by the way. That's an actual fact.
Let me tell you something, Danny. That was a fight that was actually very much bandied about, that Wilder versus Joyce fight. And I think that's when that might have been in the back of my mind when I said Wilder maybe not to retire and Wilder not to close the door just yet. That might be the fight as well too, and that fight might likely happen in the UK as well. And that's one of those fights where, from a promotional point of view, even though us boxing fans would know it wouldn't be the case, you could then say for the winner, you could shout out that they're back. Joyce, the immovable object, is back. Deontay Wilder with his big blunt force power is back, because that fight isn't ending on points. So that's a very good shout out there. And that is a fight before. This is why I was a little bit surprised that the Zhang fight was announced, because I thought they were making that one. But that's a very logical step from whoever put that forward.
Mark Martin says, salute to the Bronze Bomber. He's not the same fighter anymore, and things can get very dangerous for him. Needs something other than the right hand. Once that's taken away, there is nothing left. Nothing left. I like it. Very good. FNOR, inactivity killed him. No timing, no precision. He just feels rusty. Tushin Rance, he was never that good, guys. It really makes me laugh hearing all these people talk about the old Wilder who KO'd Journeyman. We'll be talking about his legacy shortly. Mark Martin, Wilder didn't use a meaningful jab. That pouring made it easier to time it. Agreed. Les Tweet says the next 5 versus 5 should all be in the ring at the same time, including promoters. I mean, I think Frank's probably feeling pretty cocky at the moment. He could get the job done in any setting. Leroy Vassell says, I would love to see Wilder retire from the sport of boxing. He's had a stellar career. It's time to enjoy his life and family. Where are we? Richard Smith, you can't completely write him off. Everybody was telling Joshua to hang up his gloves after Usyk, and he's slowly getting back to having his name in the mix again. I don't think that's quite the same. I think Joshua still had plenty of opportunities to be in huge fights, to compete, to win. Where I think Wilder's a lot lower ebb now than Joshua was after he lost to the best fighter in the world twice. Jack Dutton says, why did Turkey El Sheikh tweet after Dubois beat Hrgovic that if Wilder won, he would fight AJ in September? I think Wilder fighting AJ in September was always the number one choice from Turkey and the guys out in Saudi. I think that's the biggest money fight, particularly for the Saudi market. But it was always another an alternative for the winner of Dubois and Hrgovic to fight AJ for the IBF belt. DB Coupon's talking about how he hates his job. Would have been a boxer, but he tore his ACL. Very good. Tushin Rance, Turkey was visibly upset when Wilder lost. He wanted him versus Joshua. Also, he was in Wilder's dressing room hyping him up. Yeah, I suggest Turkey gives up being a hype man then, because it clearly didn't work, because Wilder didn't seem particularly motivated at any point in the Zhang fight. But yeah, Wilder's legacy, I mean, it's a tricky one, because if you look at his bare kind of stats on BoxRec and so on, he hasn't beaten many world-class heavyweights, if any. It depends on your view of Luis Ortiz, I suppose, because that's his best wins. Gave Fury a very hard first and third fight, but got absolutely drubbed in the second. Was a world champion and reigned for a long time, but his roster of challengers was pretty disappointing overall. But do we judge Wilder for something that goes beyond bare stats, in the fact that he was the biggest puncher of his era? He was someone who transcended the sport with that knockout power, a very engaging personality, and showed no fear. You know, he went in there with Fury even after he'd been destroyed in the second fight and made a go of it in the third. He was willing to go and fight a peak Oleksandr Povetkin over in Russia before the opponent, in that case, tested positive for, I think it was meldonium, and that fight was called off. But he was more than happy to board that plane to Russia when no one really wanted to go out and face Povetkin in his native land. So do we judge Wilder of what he's meant for the heavyweight division, being that American heavyweight during a pretty good era and being the biggest puncher, a chilling knockout artist?
Yeah, look, I don't think you're going to have Deontay Wilder in your top 5 or top 10 heavyweights throughout history. I don't think that's his place in terms of his legacy. I think his legacy comes out a little bit further when you kind of look at the recent years of the heavyweight division. You know, Tyson Fury spoke about the heavyweight division being boring for many years as Vladimir and Vitaly reigned for a number of years, and it was boring in those years. And on the UK side, it took Fury to go over there and displace Vladimir of his titles. Fury then went absent, and AJ came in and brought back the excitement. And on the other side of the Atlantic, it was Wilder doing the similar sort of same thing. Sure, he might not have had the opposition in front of him that really gave him a bit of a challenge, but he brought that excitement with the right hand, which is a feared and fearsome right hand. It's one of those right hands where you would put him in those fantasy matchups and say, like, how would this right hand had fared against someone like a George Foreman or an Ernie Shavers or something or someone of that ilk, Mike Tyson. You'd want to talk about those fantasy matchups. When it comes to those, Wilder definitely has a place in that, so he definitely won't be forgotten. And if this was a different decade, Deontay Wilder would be a real, true mainstream star over in America as well. It's just a shame that boxing hasn't got its place as much as it used to, off of the back of it not being one of the more favored sports, anyways, in over in America. But I think Deontay Wilder, you got to look at his achievements, and to get to where he was and to have his reign and to win a world title and to have a bronze medal as well too in the Olympics off of the back of really limited amateur pedigree. I think he's had a brilliant career, and he's incredibly ambassadorial. He speaks very well about the sport. I'm not much of a socially, I'm not much of a social commentator, but if you want to look at it this way as well too, he speaks about the need to be a man about things in both the positive macho way and also looking at the negatives and being vulnerable, which hasn't been spoken about too. You've seen this man be open and honest about some of the dangers and how it affects him and how he feels about it. And I think that's been really important to look at that, and really important that he's given that time to speak about things that don't get discussed as well too. So I really kind of credit Deontay Wilder for being a credit of the sport. He also has to take some negative jabs as well too with some of the lines he's come out with. It's gotten to the point of it being boring, but when we're looking to promote boxing as well too, talking about wanting the body on the record isn't the best of things to say sometimes as well, and that's not something that I condone either. But on the whole, I think he's been someone who has brought real excitement in years when there hasn't been that excitement. It's just a real shame when you talk about legacy that one big fight has escaped him, and both Eddie Hearn and both Shelley Finkel will have to take some portion of the blame. We won't know the truth as to what really happened on there, but for Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder to have not fought once in what now would be, if they were to face such a reduced, such a shadow of a fight now, it is a real shame that fight never came to materialize when it should have happened for Undisputed those many years ago. And that will also be part of his legacy as well too.
Very well said. Now we're going to move on to Daniel Dubois shortly, but I'm just going to have another look at the chat. Jack Dutton says, I thought the plan was that the winner of Dubois Hrgovic would fight, sorry, the chat's just gone up, would fight AJ for the IBF interim title. That's certainly the working plan now, Jack, but I think there was also the chance that AJ would fight Wilder if he had a somewhat rejuvenated performance against Zhilei Zhang, which obviously didn't happen. Surf Rat says Chisora versus Wilder in Zimbabwe, retirement fight, final go. Again, we have to see what happens with Joyce and Chisora, which I'm hoping is a retirement fight in its own right. DB Cooper 1, the biggest loser in all this is Fury CV. I think that's actually a valid point from DB Cooper 1, and he fell over. Wilder was simply collecting his pension and future child support payments. Yeah, all right. Well, let's not wish child support payments on anyone. Dan Holmes, Wilder was never a top heavyweight. DB Cooper 1 is saying that Ayman's glasses suit him. So that's nice. What? All right, yeah, DB Cooper 1's kind of slowly taken over the chat now. So I think it's an apt time to move on to the other big heavyweight fight on the 5 versus 5 card. And we've alluded to it a little bit earlier. And that's Daniel Dubois getting what can only be described as well, it's not the only way, but it can be described as a redemptive victory over Filip Hrgovic. Just confounding a lot of the doubters, probably proving a few things to himself as well. It's an interesting one. So I was speaking to Ayman about this off camera before we started. And when I watched it on Saturday night, it felt very much like Dubois was on the brink. He was getting pinged all about the place by Hrgovic, and then really showed some mettle to pull it back. Now, I'm not saying he didn't show mettle, but I rewatched it today in the cold light of day this afternoon. I happened to just switch on the TV about 2 o'clock this afternoon because, I don't work full time apparently. And instead of Countdown or whatever else students watch during the day, it still had the TNT channel on from the other night. And we'll get onto a bit of TNT criticism later. But so the fight had literally just started. So I sat down and watched the whole thing once again. And Dubois was very competitive, even in the early rounds when I think I had him 3-2 down and then maybe 4-3 down after 7, something like that. But he was always in the fight. He was always kind of breaking Hrgovic down. He was targeting the body a lot more than his opponent was. And he always seemed in it. He never seemed discouraged. And I just think because of the drama and the narrative that follows Dubois around after the Joe Joyce fight, I think I had thought he was in more trouble than he actually was. And they certainly didn't seem to be panicking in the corner either. I mean, his dad was particularly animated running around the ring, but I don't think they were worried or concerned for Dubois. But yeah, so we've got some more punch stats from Jabba. Again, Vinny, if you could put those up for us, that'd be great. It kind of tells the story of the fight. A lot busier heavyweight fight than the one that would follow it, thankfully. Maybe one of the better fights of the night as well. So yeah, Hrgovic actually landed more shots. But I would say that a lot of Hrgovic's shots, while accurate, didn't carry the same weight necessarily as Dubois', which were the more telling blows. As you can see there, high impact, Dubois got the edge, which doesn't surprise me at all. They threw a very similar amount, which I guess means Dubois was missing a lot. Although I thought Dubois' head movement was much improved in this fight. I saw elements of the kind of bobbing and weaving that we've come to associate with trainer Don Charles' most celebrated charge, Derek Chisora. And yeah, I think Hrgovic started well. He seemed to be kind of coasting to an extent. The better technical boxer, it seemed, early on. But as soon as Dubois kind of got a bit between his teeth, I don't know, round 2, I think he landed that big right hand over the top that split open Hrgovic's eye for the first time. And I think once he knew that he could land and he could hurt him significantly, I don't think there was any looking back at that point. And I think Dubois fought like someone with the mentality that he knew he would get to him in the end. And so it proved that he came out for the penultimate round and just really put it on Hrgovic. It was his best round of the fight so far. I think it was the 7th. Backed him to the ropes, unloaded shots. Some of them were kind of winging wild shots. They didn't all land cleanly. But because Dubois had his chin tucked with that bobbing and weaving style and he was coming forward as he threw the shots as well, he'd often land with his head as kind of an extra glove. Not intentionally, but it's the, it's war in there, isn't it? And Dubois just seemed ecstatic at the end to have come through what he considered a war. He mentally seemed so switched on. And they said to him in the corner, I think it was after the first round, throw a double jab and then a right hand. The commentators kept talking about it as well. And Don Charles was very vocal in saying, you don't need to land the jabs. You're throwing a double jab to get you in range, to get your feet in range to land the right hand at the end of it. And that proved incredibly effective as the fight wore on, as did the body shots. Ayman, what did you make of how the fight kind of twisted and turned?
Yeah, look, I kind of agree with you, as I didn't quite see as much of the jeopardy as maybe it was perceived to be in that first viewing. And like you said, and I'll be direct in my response here, a lot of it is to do with a lot of people throwing around the quitter word and thinking that Dubois, for want of a better phrase, would jack it as soon as he would receive a big shot from Filip Hrgovic. I've had these conversations with people within the industry, and they seem to just think like Dubois is just a topside fighter. If the momentum's going his way, he's happy, but as soon as he gets one back, he won't want to know, and that'll be his undoing. Well, he's really proved that wrong now, and I think anyone who's holding the sentiment that he's a quitter, anyone's holding the sentiment that he'll jack it when he gets under pressure, I think you've got to really take that away. I get and understand what happened in Joy's fight. I get and understand that people will say he got knocked out for it by a jab and didn't want anything to do anymore with the Usyk fight. But in these tough get-going moments against Jarrell Miller and now against Filip Hrgovic, I think he's really proven his heart and his mettle here. And he is still some of those things. He is still very much a momentum fighter. You have to stop and stifle his momentum. Otherwise, it's the train coming through without anything stopping him. And Filip Hrgovic really showed no real nous there, despite his experience as well, too, to stop and hold and jab away at Daniel, to really kind of just stop what was happening on. And he didn't do it. And I thought Dubois, although this won't be shown and is said about Dubois as much, but I think it's more of a game plan, but Dubois still had to execute it. And this is coming from a Don Charles side of things. But I think he showed intelligence as well, too, to like bob and weave, as you were saying, to notice and understand that he was the shorter man, so he could get under Filip Hrgovic more to do what he loves doing best, is not being a defensive fighter or defensively sound as much. And he did take some big shots, but knowing what he is and being a fighter who just wants to throw hooks, just wants to throw to the head to knock out his opponent. And he got there. He got his just results. He got what he wanted to, and it showed real mettle to do that. I thought it was really impressive in an offensive way for Daniel Dubois. Now, whether that will be something that's be just as fruitful in his next few fights, especially with what's on the line next, I'm not so sure. There's a lot to be arrested here, especially with some of the conversations surrounding Stan Dubois and his presence in the corner. Now, there's a conversation going on online as to what his role is, and naturally, his role is Daniel Dubois' father. But I also think kind of in these moments, Stan Dubois is needed because he does see himself looking over in the corner to Stan. His dad, I should say, in this sentence. He does see him, looking for those instructions. Whilst Don Charles is his lead trainer, I do feel that Dubois' success is really kind of paramount on being able to hear his father and know that his father's there giving his instruction and knows his son. I think he draws confidence from that, as well as listening to Don Charles too. I can't actually remember. I don't know if you can, Danny, of Stan being such a visible presence in Shane McGuigan's corners.
No.
So I think that's
or in Shane McGuigan's gym.
Yeah, so that's clearly been a change there, and that's naturally come from Stan, and that's naturally been accepted by Don and Daniel, and it's working. So do you accept the chaos there? I think while it works, you do accept the chaos. Maybe you try and temper it a little bit more, and have Don's voice a little bit more prominent. But when a fighter is so in tune with his father, like the case is here, and looks like he needs his father in the corner, and it's bearing the fruit of success right now, it's just about working. So I think he's needed there.
His name's Stan. He's his son's #1 fan. His tea's gone cold. He's wondering why, etc., etc. Yeah, I mean, from what they were saying on the TNT commentary, Frank Warren at ringside was encouraging Stan/Dave Dubois, whichever name you prefer, to get more involved in the corner. So they obviously do feel it's working. It certainly worked against Hrgovic. But we weren't the only interested observers, and we certainly didn't have as much of a stake in the fight as someone else who was watching from ringside next to the promoters, Eddie and Frank, which must have been interesting for him anyway. Vinny, if you've got that picture courtesy of Mark Robinson at Matchroom, this is Anthony Joshua watching ringside during the Dubois-Hrgovic fight. Absolutely fixed on what's going on in the ring, despite Eddie Hearn's, I don't know, adoring glance, efforts to distract him, bit of both. What we'd like from you guys as well, before we get on to talking about a potential Dubois-AJ fight, if you can caption this picture for us, what is Eddie Hearn saying to AJ here, and obviously being completely ignored? But what is he saying? Let us know in the comments. We'll read out some of the best ones. Get your funny hats on, guys. But yeah, Dubois, so it was seen before the fight as a potential box-off, if you like, to face AJ for the IBF title. Until until Oleg mentioned after the hard fight with Tyson Fury, which has got about another 2 or 3 weeks to go, we won't know what the IBF decide. That apparently, according to Frank Warren, they can't strip him of the IBF belt until then. But he is obliged to fight the IBF #1 next. And that's what we've been told, albeit that was Hrgovic until he lost. So does that change the goalpost somewhat? Because I'm sure that Usyk, Fury, and the teams would like the rematch to be for undisputed once again. But if not, Dubois secured the IBF interim crown last night with the win over Hrgovic. Could he be upgraded before a potential fight with Joshua at Wembley on the 21st of September? I think it's the 21st. Possibly. Or could they fight for the vacant IBF world title, the first world heavyweight title that Anthony Joshua won, of course, against Charles Martin? And I would hope that he would get a sterner test from his compatriot in Daniel Dubois than he did against the mercurial southpaw. Ayman, before we talk about the fight itself, how likely do you think it is that we see Dubois in the opposite corner to AJ on that big show at Wembley in September?
Firstly, I just want to comment here, actually. Daniel Dubois can count himself really unlucky, and Don should be really frustrated as well too, as should be Daniel and the team, that he isn't actually IBF full heavyweight champion. We know he won the WBA regular belt, which for some is, a version of the belt, and it's the true belt, but the WBA Super was recognized as the true belt at the time, but he won the regular, whatever, putting that to aside. But black letter of the IBF regulations, as they did with Fury, they stripped him pretty much straight away after he beat Klitschko. Can Daniel Dubois count himself really lucky to not be heavyweight champion right now? I think he can. He's interim, has to settle that for now, and that next fight will maybe see him be a contest for the true heavyweight title, which is a bit of a look. I as well too, I'll admit, I'd rather look to see the Fury versus Usyk fight being a full undisputed rematch. But again, like I said there, just being true to the word, Daniel Dubois should be really frustrated that he isn't full champion right now. But to answer your question, how likely would it be for Dubois and AJ to trade leather in Wembley later this year? I think it's really likely, considering as well too that I think with Wilder being the favoured fighter of the equation between Wilder and Zhang, wanting to build him back up, he didn't meet the bar there, and Zhang won. They wanted the Wilder fight. That's the truth of it. but they've not got that now. Zhang, he's been kind of a contender. He's been kind of one of those who's been like 5th or 6th on the list when Eddie Hearn's mentioned potential opponents for Anthony Joshua in the past. And I think that's about the place where he is right now as well, too. With that, well, he would be 2nd, I guess, right now because he's just had that. But in terms of actual real want to fight him, I don't think he ranks really highly at all. Plus, it's a fight we've seen before. Seen him fight in the amateurs as well, too, most famously. And Joshua looked really good in that fight. I don't really have the want to see it again. I think what they're doing to satiate Zhang's want to be in that fight is they're going to give him the homecoming fight. I think that's the trade-off here. You don't get Joshua, but we'll give you your home fight in China. And that's what they'll look to do to satisfy Zhang there. So therefore, Dubois comes into the mix. And Dubois and Joe Parker have really earned their opportunity to have a big fight, and that big fight to be Anthony Joshua. I'd like to see, because they've made the mix of, and it was said that one of these two fighters, whoever performs the best, will get the fight against AJ. I think it should be Dubois. That all-British clash, the bit of history to it, because Dubois, as I've mentioned in previous weeks on SO Live, if you've been listening across all platforms, including Spotify, I mentioned that Dubois when Dubois first started, when he first turned pro, maybe just a little bit before, in about that time, one of Dubois' real claim to fame was that he knocked down or knocked out Anthony Joshua. So there's a bit of history between the two. He's now one of the new rising heavyweights. He's got him back onto that pedestal. So he's got to dethrone the long-standing number one in the UK, alongside, of course, Tyson Fury. He's got a lot to say about that, but he's got other fish to fry, bigger fish to fry, in all due respect. So why doesn't AJ touch that next generation, as is said when we've talked about legacies, and fight Daniel Dubois? I think it'd be a great fight, one that he'll fancy, rightfully. Anthony Joshua should be the favourite in that fight, but it's a Matchroom versus Queensberry rematch card that's mooted, and that seems like the perfect natural fit for that card.
Yeah, it's interesting that Dubois probably spent the best part of the last week telling us that sparring isn't really that important or reflective of how a fight's going to go. And he might have to say the complete opposite in marketing the Joshua fight, because a lot of it will be built around the fact that he either dropped him or stopped him in sparring many years ago. Tushin Rant says, Hrgovic took Zhang and Dubois' best shots. What a chin. I think we've said that one already. On the other hand, Dubois needs to up the defense. If he takes them shots from AJ, it's over. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to be taking too many of those clean, similar to the ones he took from Hrgovic. Craig Lee Monkman says, Dan did much better than I gave him credit for, but his footwork was brilliant. Hrgovic was very lazy and overrated. He's had 4 to 5 big fights and come up short. Not sure he's had 4 to 5 big fights. Obviously, the Zhang one was probably the biggest before Dubois. And officially on the cards, he didn't come up short. Craig Lee Monkman also says, I think his dad has Dubois' dad, that is, as a license. Frank said on a Box Nation interview. Yeah, we're not saying he shouldn't be in the corner, by the way. It's just whether it works or not. Thunder Road, Eddie to AJ, are you sure you want to buy a stake in Watford? You'll never be bigger than Elton John.
Let me come back at that. As a Watford fan as well, too, I think that's a load of rubbish. I don't think Anthony Joshua is going to buy any minority stake. From conversations or, not great conversations I have with Anthony Joshua in the form of their length. Anthony Joshua's not really interested in the football club as a whole. He's more of in tune to the Watford community. So maybe it's more to do with the community side of things as opposed to being a figurehead when it comes to the football club. I don't think that's happening.
Umar, presumably not. We can't call him IFL Umar anymore, can we?
No.
Box Nation Umar, Box Nation. Why would he stop fighting when he can make big money for just a fight? Well, maybe his future health and that of his family. I mean, I don't know. not quite as mercenary as you, perhaps, Umar. And I don't earn the same money as these boxers, obviously, as well. Charlie Rogers says Joshua beats Dubois. I mean, that's not exactly a hot take, Charlie, but we'll read it out nonetheless. Toby Bartlett's got a caption idea. Here, AJ, I've just nicked Frank's watch. Put it in your pocket. There you go. We're DB Cooper 1, Eddie to AJ. At least we don't need to worry about fighting Wilder anymore. Bosh. Always good to have a Bosh. I think DB Cooper won. Second one's better, actually. So we're going to kidnap Dubois' old man before the fight, like that time we stole the boxer rings outside the O2. There you go. A bit of a niche one, but I like it. Super Soda. Dubois dropped AJ in sparring. Both are improved fighters since, but AJ is just a level above. Dubois should fight Parker or Zhang before AJ. Yeah, I mean, Dubois earned his position, though, hasn't he? He's beaten the IBF #1 heavyweight, so he deserves a shot at the IBF world title. It's just the way it works. Just like he earned his shot at Hrgovic by winning the WBA regular belt. Frank's done a great job. See, I should mention this as well, because obviously I know I give Frank Warren a lot of credit. He is, hashtag good friend and Hall of Fame promoter. I realised what I just did wasn't a hashtag, air quotes, but still. He has done a marvellous job with Dubois, considering where, built him up to that Joyce fight, which was a big money fight, did really good views, I seem to remember, on TNT, which was then BT, and lost that fight in awful circumstances, not just the severity of the injury to broken orbital bone, which was pretty bad in itself, but also the amount of derision and criticism he got afterwards for being what people termed as a quitter, even though I imagine most people with a broken orbital bone would just be in a pool of their own blood crying rather than trying to get up. He was at his lowest ebb, and he's brought him back with the right fights at the right times, despite problems, outside the ring, changing trainers, everything else. Got him into that position for the WBA regular belt, which he won on away soil, albeit against, not much in Trevor Bryan on the night, but, still did it. Had to deal with all Don King shenanigans and so on. Won that, got himself ready for the Usyk fight. Didn't go his way, but, did enough, put in enough of a showing in that fight to keep him relevant. And let's not forget, Dubois is still very young as well, especially for a heavyweight. And then after losing to Usyk, he's come back with what was on paper a tough fight against Big Baby Miller. Won that pretty clearly. And then it comes in again as the underdog against Filip Hrgovic. Wins that IBF #1 position in the interim belt. I think it's a great example, not just of Dubois' resilience, which I think is now proven, but also of Warren's kind of ingenuity, even in his advancing years. When he's truly behind a fighter, when he really believes in a fighter, he will move heaven and earth to get them in the right position and help them to stay there. DB Coupon's got a few more here. Pro Boxing says Parker versus Triple D and Zhang versus AJ. Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting Dubois versus AJ, whether you like it or not, but we shall see. Now, I think we should make an effort at least to cover the rest of the 5 versus 5 card, because although the heavyweight fights were the 2 most celebrated, I think we do need to discuss the lower weights. We've given a fair bit of credit to Willie Hutchinson for beating Craig Richards, but the other 2 fights have been largely, I won't say ignored by us, because we're both kind of into those fights, but we haven't really discussed them. So, Vinny, if you can hear me, we'll have headline number 3 whacked up on the Tron, if that's all right. But Ayman, Hearn hammered. Very good. I've seen so many different descriptive phrases, hammered, battered, bludgeoned, etc., and it was 10-0. But the 2 fights that we haven't talked about were probably on paper the closest to we would have said in the previous episode. Everyone in Britain certainly seems to be delighted that Nick Ball got over the line and took the decision in his world title clash with the champion going in, Ray Ford, primarily because, for all intents and purposes, it seemed like he got the unfair end of the decision, the draw with Ray Vargas last time out. But there is a case to be made that Ford could have taken that. I believe you had him ahead. I had Nick Ball winning, although in a close fight. How did you kind of sum up that contest?
Yeah, look, I thought there was a bit of ebb and flow in that fight. I thought at points, Ray looked great. I thought in points, Nick Ball looked really good in the early part of the fight. And I just think that Ray will really kick himself, although I don't want to take too much away from Nick Ball's brilliant win here. I think a little bit of immaturity and not listening to his corner too much. A little bit of kicking himself because he didn't push on after he looked like he broke Nick Ball's nose there. And a little bit of lack of nous to not kind of implement. What surprises me really, just to get this out, is I have no doubt that Ray Ford would have encountered that type of style countless times in sparring, done those doghouse spars, done that type of thing where it's been up against it and had fighters throwing so much and so much and so much at him, and that's what I think gave him the confidence to just shut up a little bit and not throw back as much, because he's done that and looked good and had the adulation in the sparring and been told, you won that, that he probably took that confidence in, and that's where he let it slip. Showed that little bit of lack of desire for me to really push on and defend his belt, where I think if this was Ray Ford and he'd lost a tight decision and not got that stoppage against Kolmotov, and much in the way that Nick Ball was denied, and he took that into this fight, it might be a little bit different, and we didn't saw a little bit more of Ray Ford here, because I don't think Ray Ford lost because he was tight at the weight or anything. Thought he looked good. I thought we pretty much saw a complete version of Ray Ford here. I think the desire to chase is greater than the desire to defend a little bit more, and he was almost happy a little bit to acquiesce and not give a full account of himself, and I think he'll really kick himself moving forward. I think he'll do great. I don't think this would really dent him in any way as he looks to move up a division. I see him winning world titles as well. I think he's a really good fighter. I just think on the night, he just didn't give a good enough account of himself. And just on the Nick Ball side of things, quality, he understood what he needed to do. He understood what he needed to do against what really is an all-round better fighter, and he did it to great effect. He wasn't at it at all. He took the hurt of being denied in the Ray Vargas fight into this fight, and he would not be denied even in the face of a broken nose as well too. And you've got now a world champion who, I've got a soft spot for the region of Liverpool. Real big fan of Liverpool as a city, and he's someone who I think the whole Liverpool can get behind. He's kind of on the outside looking in, because I'm from Birmingham here, but sometimes Scousers might not get behind other Scousers for whatever reason. I don't think Fowler was too well liked in amongst Liverpool from some areas of Liverpool. But Nick Ball is someone who I think can bring together the red and blue divide, the north and south, the poor and the rich Liverpool. I think he's a champion in Liverpool to really kind of get behind, and he kind of found his way. He was there to get beat, wasn't he, by Isaac Lowe? He wasn't fancied by Frank. Frank told a little bit of a porcupine, saying that we backed Nick Ball from the start. Well, I don't think you quite did, but you will now, and he should now get that back in as well to a real good fighter who British fans will really take to as well, outside of just Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great fighter to watch. Always going to be an exciting fight. And I think the British featherweight division at the moment, there's fights that can be made. You've got the Jazza Dickens, who's on the kind of comeback trail at the moment. I don't know if he'll go back to featherweight, but he was another product, most famous before Nick Ball, of that Everton Red Triangle gym. So if that's a fight that can be made, you've got Josh Warrington, of course, left perhaps without a dance partner, if Lee Wood's definitely moving up to super feather. And then you've got Wood himself, who I think has said he can still make feather, but only for the right fight, because it's tremendously tough to do so. I don't think Nick Ball's going to have any weight difficulties anytime soon. So there's plenty for him to look at in the future. But yeah, every bit as good a performance, in my view, as the one against Vargas, just perhaps with slightly fairer judging or more competent judging this time around. And yeah, I understand people saying it could have gone either way, but I just think in the really close rounds, if you're the one who's being more aggressive, who's pushing the fight, who's making the other person react, judges tend to find favour with that. Just looking at the chat now before we go on to the other fight. In fact, Super Soda says, Hamza Shiraz, a superstar in the making. How do you think a fight between him and Eubank Jr. would go down? We'll talk about Shiraz's fight in a minute, and I'm sure we'll get onto the Eubank Jr. aspect. Craig Lee Monkman, I think Hamza could be the new king of the middleweight division. DB Cooper 1, credits Frank Warren for backing British boxing grassroots like Hutch, Ball and Shiraz. All whilst Hearn seeks the next big Yank superstars from big gyms, national teams like Ford and Ammo. I mean, I think it's a bit different in that Hearn had a remit to crack the US market, didn't he, with the zone and the expansion and so on. So I don't think it's as simple as him prioritizing getting an American superstar. I think he had to do that because he was moving into a US market in a big way, whereas Warren wasn't. So yeah, a little bit unfair. I'm not normally someone who sticks up for Hearn very often, to be fair, but in this case, yeah. Who else? James Wilson says retire immediately. I don't know if he's talking to Wilder or us, but hopefully we've got a good few years yet left. Ayman. Craig Lee Monkman, Ford was brilliant, but only in the last half of the fight. which gave him it all to do. Ball was excellent, come forward, always attacking. Yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, Hamza Shiraz, I felt like this was going to be one of the closest fights and also more of a chess match than it turned out to be. You know, Hamza's known for his patience. Ammo, in theory, on paper, would have to show a level of patience to get inside those long arms and do the sort of work he needed to do to win the fight. But it quickly settled into a pattern of Shiraz being proactive and Ammo being reactive. And that's always going to suit the taller, rangier man. You know, if you're not pushing the fight, if you're not forcing the other guy to fight at your pace and you're being kept on the outside just because of your physical disadvantages, it's a bit of an uphill struggle. And so it proved. And Shiraz obviously hits very hard as well. Given his age, I thought mentally he rose to the occasion impeccably. Also, Ayman, what did you make of it?
Yeah, very much the same sort of thing. I heard some of the commentary and some of the comments from his corner, Ricky Funes, 10 Goose Boxing, working under Joe Goose, and he was saying to Hamza, look, I think Hamza must have made mention that he was getting tagged early from Ammo, and Funes just told him, look, that's what's going to happen. You're in the big leagues now. You're here, and it's not going to go all your way like his previous fights have pretty much gone, aside from really the Skeet fight. But he's learned from those mistakes and has been able to adapt and get the success he's had. And I don't think he adapted too much, but he came into this fight, and when he had those couple of rocky moments, he had the confidence to say, look, I'm going to steady and ride through the rocky moments, and I'll come through with my success, and we'll see if Ammo Williams can take my Ammo. And it turned out to be that Ammo, look, he was brave. Look, Ammo kind of won a lot of fans, even in defeat as well, too, for his display in that fight. But for Shiraz, this really kind of pays off for Hamza when he's taken the risk to remove himself from the UK, taken the risk to go over to America. That not only does that come with risk, it also comes up with a lot of financial outlay to pay for those camps, to take yourself over there, to remove yourself from your family, to not have those visits over. You've really kind of sacrificed so much, and that's come dividends from him. So he'll gain a lot from that moving forward. And it's a type of win for me, really, that, you know, sometimes with Hamza's fights, they've been to the point where, you know, it's pretty much favored towards him and that he's just got to, you know, grind out that victory. But this was one of those fights that wasn't the case here. So you, as a commentator looking, or as a commentator looking on that really kind of solidifies him as a true, when you get a lot of hype about prospects coming forward, and Hamza's not a prospect now, he's a contender, but you don't really know you don't know the true value of them until they have these type of wins. And Hamza's really proved himself as a legitimate contender right now, where there's a real opportunity in the middleweight division when the likes of Golovkin and Canelo have long since departed, and that talent isn't there right now for someone to really take over. And Janibek isn't doing that right now. He's head and shoulders above everyone else, but he's not unifying. He's not getting I think he did in the last fight, but he's not taken over as he should be doing. So Hamza's there, right there now, and he's probably, you can see that being his next fight. You can see a world title being his next fight off of the back of that. He's got such great assets in his frame, and the way he's able to just, those long arms, and they cover pretty much the whole of his body. So you just got a great defense because of what he's naturally gifted with. Is someone who really, and now with the influence and the real kind of investment from the Saudi side, him being a Muslim, him being relatable in that region, could really propel him to being a massive superstar. It's the side of that we might lose is he might not translate over, or might not get the opportunity to be a true superstar in the UK as a whole, like Amir Khan was. Amir Khan didn't just relate to the Asian community, he also translated over to the UK community because of his spoils in the Olympics. And Hamza might have to trade that off with the riches and what comes in the Saudi region for the UK region as a whole. But onwards and upwards for Hamza Shiraz. Would love to see him in the fight against the likes of Liam Smith, the likes of Chris Eubank Jr., Shane Mosley. But yeah, brilliant performance. Great win from Hamza.
Yeah, I mean, it was a WBC eliminator, so really he's, on the cusp of a world title shot. But when he was asked post-fight what he wanted next, no doubt in his mind. He said Chris Eubank Jr. straight away. That presumably wouldn't be for a world title. And Eubank Jr. is someone he's been calling out for at least the last year now. So Eubank Jr. not heard much from him since that publicised spat, I suppose, with his promoters at the time. I think he insists he's now a free agent. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where that's going to go. The Conor Benn fight looks certainly off the table for him for now. I think that Hamza, by virtue of what he did in the 5 versus 5, has put himself probably on that level now where Eubank Jr. would consider him as an opponent. Like, you would have to say that he's as well, maybe not as well known, but as big a fish to oppose Eubank Jr. as Liam Smith was before their first fight. You know, it's not, or Liam Williams certainly before he fought Eubank Jr. He's at least that sort of level now. I suppose the difference is that when he fought Williams and Smith, they were they'd been around, they'd been there, done it. They were at a certain level. Eubank Jr. was physically bigger than both of them as well. And he would have seen them as, you know, guys that he could make money against, but he would be favoured largely to beat. I think with Shiraz, because he's young, he's fresh, and he's huge for the weight, in a way that Eubank Jr., who we've always said is big for the weight, can only dream of, I think it's a genuine 50-50 fight. And I don't know if Eubank Jr. wants genuine 50-50 fights at this stage of his career. I wouldn't blame him if he didn't. But for Hamza Shiraz, that could be a real coming out party for him. Let's just have a look at the chat. A few have come through since last time. DB Cooper 1's accusing me of being on the Matchroom payroll, but as Nat points out, everyone knows my favourite is the Hall of Fame promoter, Uncle Frank Warren. Tushin Rant says, I had ball 115-113, but extremely close and could have gone either way. DB Cooper 1, let his backtrack now. I was just joking. SO is decent when it comes to impartially. You mean impartially? Oh, I don't want to correct you because you're being nice. But a convo needs to be had about how fickle parts of the industry are. Happy to have that convo on our channel anytime. But yeah, we are bias out here at Seconds Out, if you didn't already know. DB Cooper 1, Eubank is good for Shiraz's profile and money, but I also think if a world title is there in September, he ought to go for it with Adames. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one because if you back him heavily to beat Adames, and I probably would at this stage, then he brings a world title into the equation, which gives Eubank Jr. another reason, another incentive to fight him. He's never won a proper world title, Eubank Jr. He won't thank me for pointing that out. Not that he's watching, I'm sure. Thunder Road. I hope Flexen gets the assignment to cover the React Paul Chris Billum Smith clash at Selhurst Park. I'm not going to that show, unfortunately. I think it's a good show, and I think the main event will be good. It could be a bit messy, though. I remember their first fight being quite messy, although I watched that on TV. The People's Champ says AJ versus Dubois for September 21st. I'm hearing. I love it when people say that. Yeah, I'm hearing this. I'm hearing that. I mean, we're all reading that. We're all reading that it's likely to be September 21st, and that it's AJ Dubois. Thunder Road again. Eubank does not fancy Shiraz. Frank or the Saudis would need to overpay him. Well, I think they're capable of doing so. Eubank is more about the pound note than most. Yeah, I mean, I find it hard to blame him for that. It's a short, punishing career, being a boxer. Craig Lee Monkman, if Hamza does fight Eubank, we'll know what level he's really at. But he beats Eubank. Yeah, I mean, I would have said Eubank could be a massive favourite even just a year ago. And based on Hamza's last couple of performances, plus Eubank's inactivity and the surprise loss a while ago to Liam Smith in their first fight, I think now it is a genuine 50-50. DB Cooper 1 wants to send Radio Raheem to York Hall. He gets where Walter can't. Yeah, I mean, most people can get to York Hall, though, so I'm not sure it's a great analogy. It's not the hardest place to get to, is it? Hardest place to park, I think. It may be a problem. But yeah, so just moving on from the 5 versus 5, because we've already gone way over what we normally do in terms of time. We did want to talk briefly about the 2 Tysons in the news this week. Not the 2 Titans, the 2 Tysons. And that's Tyson Fury and Mike Tyson, from whom he was named, of course, by his dad, Big John, who's a big fan of Mike Tyson, and so named his son Tyson Fury. Tyson Fury now has a date for his rematch with Oleksandr Usyk. Although he said, let's run it back in October, immediately after losing the first fight, it will now take place December 21st, giving them both ample time to recover from a pretty punishing first fight, I suppose. So let's keep it simple because we haven't got ages left. Ayman, what does Tyson Fury need to do, in your view, differently to secure victory in the rematch?
he needs to look at rounds 4, 5, and 6 and see the successes that he was having there and implement that more into his game plan going forward. I think it's been said, to the nth degree as using his physical assets, and he just didn't use them at all when it came to the actual fight with Usyk. Look, a lot of that would be due to Usyk's greatness, but we're focused on Fury and what he can do. I just feel like Fury can really stifle Usyk there because he has the range and reach, and he can make some of the early rounds or some of the rounds where Usyk is getting the success to, even if he loses the round, just make him not as successful in those rounds by just jabbing and grabbing and holding and being boring. I think Fury's route to success is really being boring as well in moments in the fight. And as well, the big thing too is, look, if you've got Sugar Hill in your corner, then do and set out to do and execute what Sugar Hill and you do best, is to be on that front foot and look to hurt your opponents. You don't necessarily have to really kind of throw and gamble that much and really go for that knockout, but really be on that front foot a lot more and keep your range set so you can dictate when you are on the front foot more and not have Usyk take that away from you, not be on the ropes as much. And really, I think you have to eliminate some of the successes of what Fury got there in the first place, some of his good footwork. You'll really kind of ignore some of that and really just kind of hold your ground with it, and then step in with Usyk as well. So you stifle his work and then look to get those clinches, as I was saying beforehand. I think those are the real kind of key things I feel Fury has to do moving forward to change the title. And I really don't think it's out of the realms of possibility here. Vidal Riley, I think he spoke and he kind of said, like, I think it's going to sound weird that I actually favor Fury in the rematch. I don't think it sounds weird. At this point in time, I actually sort of get the feeling that Fury's going to do it. Don't know why, don't know what it is, but I just feel that he's got something more about him to really kind of change the tide here, and that the tide changed multiple times in that fight. And I had it a closer fight. I know some people had it wider, but I think Fury's got a few tweaks here to change the win or the loss into a win.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with all of that. The people's champ here in the chat says they need to get Big John away from Tyson's corner. That seems to be a prevailing opinion online. But again, is it similar to Daniel Dubois' dad being in the corner? Although it's chaos, is it managed chaos? I know he didn't come out on the right end of the decision against Usyk, but does the presence of his father, the motivational factor, does that play into it with Fury? Will that be helpful to him? Maybe, they just need to work out who talks when and they're not talking over each other. We shall see. But from one Tyson to another, we found out that Mike Tyson's fight with Jake Paul has been postponed after he suffered a bit of a health scare on a flight last weekend. And apparently it's an ulcer flare-up. And Tyson insists he's still in great shape, but he needs to trail down to minimal training over the next couple of weeks. So the fight will only be postponed, not cancelled. But when I saw the news, I immediately thought, that's a sign, surely, his age, miles on the clock, habits since retirement. Is it time for Mike Tyson? I mean, it's beyond time, surely, for Mike Tyson to say goodbye to boxing. And you wouldn't think he'd be in too much trouble against Jake Paul, but surely that's a sign, isn't it? It's not a good idea. What do you think, Ayman?
Yeah, I agree. It isn't a good idea, but the problem is that Netflix need to make a big splash. They need to keep bringing content. They need to keep driving subscribers, and this was going to be huge. This was probably, from some of the conversations I had with Dana Colby, who's got his real finger on the pulse with this side of the boxing sphere. This was tracked to be the biggest fight of the year, bigger than Undisputed, bigger than any fight that's probably going to happen, bigger than the Undisputed rematch. This is going to be huge, and that's part of the problem as to why we might still see this fight unless something can happen between KSI and Jake Paul, where it's agreed between Netflix and DAZN that they can stream their fight on both their platforms. But I think Netflix really want to make a big splash and have it on their own platform, so that might scupper these sort of things. It's an issue. I don't think, and it's imagine if this is what you got to kind of weigh up. I think when it comes to the money aside, and like I don't think the people on the board, or when it comes to the conversations about the money that can be made, they quite figure into it the health side of things. You've got to kind of answer, like, if Tyson was in the ring and something was to happen to him, because he's getting hit in the head, he's getting hit to the body as well too. What would be the ramifications, the consequences if you really hurt a true pop culture icon, and coming down to it, an old man in the ring against a young athletic man who's trying to make his name in the sphere himself as well too. It's a real somber and sobering thought to think about as to what could be the potential outcomes of on the real bad side of things. And it's a real worry if this fight does go ahead, as to what could happen here. And on the flip side as well too, like, I equally just as much worry as seeing and hearing, I don't know if you saw this, Danny, Amir Khan is apparently going to take on KSI. And then when Amir Khan, as he states, beats KSI, wants to go for Jake Paul. And I'm just thinking, I do not want to see you in the ring again, full stop. Even if it's against KSI, who isn't a legitimate boxer, isn't whatever, wouldn't even get anywhere near your achievements in the ring.
What weight is Khan going to be at?
Well, Khan was at middleweight. KSI kind of fights at cruiser. Khan would just get to the weight, wouldn't he? He might have to have a roll of pound coins as well in both pockets too to make the weight. But again, that's part of the problem as well. And considering he can't hold a shot as well as he could do, even though a lot of people like to discredit his chin, the Maidana fight for me really proved that he can take a shot. Right now, I wouldn't want to see him get beat by KSI at all, or Jake Paul, much as the same way I don't want to see Jake Paul beat up an old, aged Mike Tyson as well. It's a real problem. I mean, this would have been pitched to the Saudis, and Turki Al-Sheikh said, no, I don't want these crazy YouTuber fights. I don't want this. So they had to go. They've been exiled out of there, and they had to take this to the UK, and the US. Netflix have taken it on board. I just wonder. Look, it's not. The risk won't get any greater than this, but I hope they don't get any greater than this, because I wouldn't want to see. They did it. Do you remember seeing Evander Holyfield out with? Was it which Pulev did he fight? Kubrat?
Did he?
Or Tabel? Yeah, Evander Holyfield. Either way, Evander Holyfield fought on one of these Triller cards, and it was embarrassing to see. And he did well to not get really, really hurt. Thankfully, he didn't get really hurt, and I think that's curtailed any want from Evander Holyfield to get back in the ring. Hopefully, it has. Same sort of thing could happen, even if it is against a novice pro. Those sort of things shouldn't be happening, and I don't want to see the fight happening.
Good stuff. Thunder Road says, great show, gents. What other big boxing channel gives you live content like this on a weekly basis? We had a live watch along on Saturday night as well. It was a lot more than 75 minutes and counting, which is what we are apparently. Chat, please hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. I endorse that view. Thanks, Thunder Road. Craig Lee Monkman, the part where Fury says if they'd have said to KO Usyk in the 12th, he would have. Isn't that the name of the game anyway? And Usyk will make improvements. Also, I think he beats him again. Great chat, boys. No problem. DB Cooper 1 says he fancies KSI, which is off topic, but fair enough. Or something like that. John says, big boy's been following from the start. Leave a like, folks. Yeah, that too. Right, before we go, we did put a poll out at the very start of the show. It feels like days ago now. But we asked you, should Deontay Wilder retire? Simple yes or no. Modfather Vinny, if you can hear me, please do give us the results of that poll. If this was like a cool production, we'd have like a drum roll and then it'd flash up on the screen. But let me just see. Vinny, have you closed the poll? Vinny, you still there? Have you fallen asleep while we've been talking for too long?
Yeah,
we've got quite a lot of votes. So yes, is a whopping 72%. I mean, it's an overwhelming majority in favor of Deontay Wilder sailing off into the sunset and spending some valuable time enjoying retirement with his, was it 7 kids?
Yeah, something like that. He's got a crazy amount of mouths to feed.
Well, there you go. I've just got one really big mouth to feed. But yeah, so yeah, Deontay Wilder, according to the chat, should retire 72% to 27%. Guys, I just want to thank you all for joining us and the ones who've stuck with us for the, probably 80 minutes now, 85. We don't normally go for this long, present company excluded. But yeah, really appreciate you all watching. Please do give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And if you are watching on playback rather than live, please do leave comments because we do review them and sometimes respond to them as well. As is customary, I took up loads of time with my anecdote, which may or may not become a regular thing at the very start of the show, but we always give the final word to my colleague, Mr. Ayman Khan.
Yeah, on the boxing side of things, congratulations to some of those fighters this weekend have really made a name of themselves in their breakthrough performances. One of the standing things that was left with me when I was thinking about this 5 versus 5 card, and it weren't even about Hearn versus Warren at all. It was about some of these fighters getting opportunities where the big nights and bright lights of having their name headlined on Las Vegas might elude them in their career, but they get to be part of something really big in Saudi Arabia. It might not happen ever again. So they've got a spotlight which they can really kind of hold on to years after they retire. So great work from everyone involved to give them those opportunities and then to them to seize their moments. Yeah, thank you to everyone in the chat as well, to some new names as well. Great to see some new names in here every week. Hopefully we'll see you in some of the lighter, leaner months discussing all of the topics in boxing. We will have actually some coverage of something a little bit different this week, although there's not much boxing going on. I will be on the road bringing you something a little bit different and interesting. So look out for that on Saturday into your Sunday as well too. I'm looking forward to seeing a new debut. There's a bit of a hint for you for a big star in boxing moving over to something different. There's another big hint for you as well too. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll keep you updated of all the latest news in boxing as and when it comes. So keep it tuned in to Seconds Out. Make sure you left a like button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you click the subscribe button if you haven't already. You can share it too and give us a review on Spotify as well. So thank you to Danny. Thank you to Vinny as well in the background. And thank you for everyone in the chat. We'll see you on the next one.